in every single city. I'm joined by partner in crime, and this time in New York it is Daniel Cohen. Daniel, how you doing, dude?
I'm doing great, Matt. We're having some excellent conversations. We're giving away some beautiful t-shirts. We have amazing phone charging and a place for you just to come and sit, hang out, and listen to some great conversations.
Yeah, come rest your feet, charge up your phones. The EV Roundcheck booth is meant to be a place where we basically bring the show together for both attendees and the industry. And every single time we're in a city, we bring out people that are on the front lines or sometimes behind the curtain making the industry happen. And today we're joined by Darrin Somerville. You are the founder of EV Blueprint. And Darrin, we're going to talk about something that is talked about very often in the industry, which is how do we help auto dealers sell an electric car in a way that they are giving the driver confidence, but we also give the sales reps the confidence to know what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I take a step back and you think about the history of electrification of dealerships back in 21, 22, 23, I think that was the area where you had some people up in the principal dealers, and a lot of times there was a hesitation. There was a lot of money spent on getting those dealerships electrified. And so a lot of pessimism started to kind of roll in, and that came down all the way down the pike to the sales advisors as this is a waste of time, a waste of money, a waste of resources. And honestly, that has not been the case. Here we are 3 years later, 4 years later, and we have a lot of adoptability from EVs. So truly there's a case to sell EVs, and we just got to get the sales advisor a little bit more experience and asking the right questions.
Well, and I think that what you're pointing to and bringing up is that, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday when we met, is we've really kind of been conditioned as a culture, whether that's a car shopper or it's someone who's selling a car, that cars and gas, man, they're just symbiotic. They go together like peanut butter and jelly, and that's what we've known for a long time. And people don't have to think about gas that hard. They just kind of buy the car they want. That could be any brand, any shape of vehicle, and the gas is just kind of waiting for them. But it's highly advertised, it's highly visible, but the sales reps haven't had to explain how to fill up a car with gas. But now they are selling cars that run on a new fuel type, and they've got to have the right information, the right moments when someone asks a question of skepticism to answer those questions, right? So, so where do we start? Where do we start?
It starts with credibility. I mean, that's the first thing. You can't walk into a dealership and ask a question and get just a vague answer. What's the mileage on this car? What's the range? 400 miles, but then inside the car it says 250. That's a problem. So you have to be credible. That's the first and foremost. Secondly, make sure that you're asking the right questions of the prospective client coming in. It's not like before with gas cars. To your point, a gas, you don't have to think about it. Fueling with an electric car is completely different because you can fuel an electric car anywhere.
Well, it's based on lifestyle in a lot of ways.
It's all about lifestyle.
Yeah,
but if you own a home or you have access to electric, you can actually charge a car at your house. It doesn't matter if you own or not,
right,
as long as you have access.
If you have access to it, electricity is basically everywhere.
I mean, you were talking earlier, Daniel, about the fact you live in Manhattan, right? And then you don't have access to charging in Manhattan. A lot of people think that what some of the misconceptions is that you need to have an expensive panel upgrade at your house if you want to run a charger. That's not exactly true.
You can unplug a lamp.
You can run 110. I get 30 to 40 miles back every night, and if the U.S. averages 37 miles every day, I never have to go to a public charger ever.
It's again, I think the use case factor is so important because so when I talk to folks about this at dealerships and other places, I'll say to them, here's the thing, is in the past when you've sold a car to anybody, could be someone who's got more money than they know what to do with, or it could be someone saying, I gotta buy the cheapest used car you got. Those two scenarios didn't matter when it came to fueling because those two people would pull up at the same gas station and have the same experience.
Same thing.
They had to. But now, as you described, it's like, well, actually, that person that has the disposable income and has a house with a garage, their fueling can now be done almost exclusively at home, whereas someone who's renting or someone who doesn't have home charging, such as yourself, you have to still go find your fill-up. So there's two different sales paths that dealership has to be able to talk to, right?
It's a mix of products as well. So, for example, if you are going in and you're asking the right questions of the client that's coming in, EV is one of the tools in your toolbox, right? You have conventional gas, you have hybrid, you have a plug-in hybrid, right? If you find out after asking your discovery questions of whether or not that vehicle is right for them, and it could be simple as, again, do you have access to electric?
Yeah.
Or you're living in an apartment, perfect example, right? And you don't have access to a parking spot. You're parking on the street and you're driving 200 miles a day. There's a good chance you may want to consult that client to say, you know what, maybe we look at a plug-in hybrid, maybe we look at a gas hybrid. it's not all, we want to sell EVs, right? We love EVs.
It's not a one-size-fits-all.
It's not a one-size-fits-all. And
Yeah.
that's what advisors have to be able to say is, get the confidence of the client, because you want to get the business regardless, right?
Right.
Because you're going to lose the business if you give false information. It's better off to say, you know what, I really don't know. Let me go get the answer for you. But instead of just spewing out something that's not correct.
Can I, so when I was 2 or 3 years ago and I was looking at buying an EV, and I'd done some research and I'd educated myself, so, and I knew my living situation in Manhattan was going to be problematic in terms of keeping it charged easily. And I went to test drive some EVs and asked the questions, and I got terrible answers from every single advisor, pretty much. The one, other than there's a Polestar studio near where I live, they were all right because that's all they deal with.
So they sell electrics, that's what they do.
And they sort of acknowledged, yeah, this might be tough for you, right? But they were the only ones who do that. But in terms of the traditional car dealers and the salesmen there, it felt like these guys are not sufficiently incentivized to want to sell an EV. That they were, they were making a half-hearted effort to do it because I had asked to drive an EV, but given their druthers, they would much rather just put me in a gas car, and because they know all the answers, much easier. And I acknowledge it kind of is more difficult maybe to sell an EV than a gas car, at least then, because people are less familiar with it and it requires more explanation. And it felt like none of these guys really had any particular reason to want to sell the EV.
I think it's easy to qualify whether someone can buy an EV. It may not be as easy to sell the car, right? But it's easy to qualify. It's easy to just ask those simple questions, right? What's your commute look like? How many cars do you have? Because most people have 2 cars, right? So if someone argues the fact that, well, I'm not going to drive my EV from New York to Florida, well, don't you have a secondary car? Yeah, well, then if you want to make your experience a little bit easier, you can drive the gas car there. But for everyday commuting, if you're averaging 37 miles, that's the average, right? Yeah. There's no reason in the world why an EV wouldn't work for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think the lack of understanding around what the personalized experience is for each of those customers, we've never seen that in automotive sales before, where they've had to ask those types of questions about how do you drive, where do you drive, where do you park? And so
maybe if you buy like a 2-seater sporty runabout, that kind of midlife crisis car.
I was gonna say, yeah, if you're buying that, it's like, I know you want this thing, and you've emotionally decided you're gonna have it.
Right.
So I think the challenge that when I've talked to a lot of dealers over the years is just getting to the place of saying, if you can ask them where they park their car at night, that's a great jumping off point.
It really is.
Because once you identify what they say, well, why do you care about that? It's like, because I think I can talk to you about some really cool things for your ownership experience with the models we have. Just, so what's the scoop? And if they say, yeah, I park in a driveway and garage, why is that? Actually, what's really cool is we can get you filling up at home all the time. Right. But if they say, I street park, I rent, whatever it might be, to your point, they have a variety of fuel options in the sense of could be pure gas, could be gas and electric, could be pure electric. That's where those sales reps, to your point, they have to know how to fit that person into that lifestyle moment to then close the sale with confidence.
It's all about lifestyle, and EVs. You're topping off constantly. You're coming home, you're topping off. You're going to your workplace. If it has EV charging, you're topping off. It could be 2-3 times a day, depending on your travel, right? You go to the supermarket, there's charges at supermarkets, you're topping off while you're in there for 30 minutes. With fueling, with gas cars, right? You go once a week, maybe, and
it's a dedicated location you gotta go to.
Yeah, so the idea of sales advisors saying, well, yeah, you can fuel in many different places, not just a gas station. To have that, sense of thought, it's very difficult for them to think that way.
Yeah, well, they've never been actively thinking about the fuel.
No.
So we've talked about a lot here, but so for EV Blueprint, what are you working on from EV Blueprint's perspective to start addressing some of these factors as it relates to sales education, training, and then helping consumers know what they're getting themselves into?
There's a couple of things I'm doing. One is I'm an advocate for EVs, so I'm out in the communities working with HOAs and trying to get people involved in learning more about EVs. Affordable EVs too, right? You got a couple of cars coming out that I'm excited about. Nissan Leaf, you got the Bolt coming out, and you got VinFast here that has some products that's pretty affordable. But the secondary piece is, and I just started EV Blueprint in September, so I'm brand new to this as far as my own business. Yes, it's been a month. But I've been in the industry for 5 years. I started on the infrastructure side with EVs, and I worked a lot with dealerships in the past, electrifying them and getting probably about 500 dealerships electrified. So as far as training, I'm trying to get dealership principal dealers, auto groups to understand the importance of the front line. The first person you meet when you walk into a dealership is an advisor, and that's the first impression you get. So if it's off and you're not credible and you find out that that information is off, not only do you hurt the dealership, you hurt the auto group, and you hurt the brand.
No, it's true. I think you're so good. I think we had a little bit of feedback.
Yeah.
No, but I think what you're pointing to is so important is the fact that we have to create confidence for those of us in the industry to not just talk about the topic, but be able to talk about it in a way that people can appreciate.
Can I ask you a question? Kind of myth and fact question, which is, maybe I spend too much time on Reddit, but one of the kind of big conspiracy theories there is that dealers don't want to sell EVs because they can't make as much money from maintaining them in the future. Is that true?
Well, there's the fixed ops guys. Yeah, I mean they have a budget that they have to hit, and obviously they're not getting the people in. A funny story. I got a funny EV story here. Is I got an email from the dealership about me coming in to do my maintenance on my vehicle, my whatever 4,000 mile oil change.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I obviously got an electric car, so there was no need.
I've had the same thing.
Yeah, so that's a perfect segue to say they're not really realizing that there's no need for that. So to your point, I'm sure fixed ops guys are probably not really excited, but you're still going to need tires. You're still going to need
they need maintenance,
wipers. You need some kind of maintenance. There's fluid changes. There's other things that you have to maintain. You just don't have to deal with a lot of the other stuff.
I think to your point, and I've seen that question asked a lot of the times in the past, I don't think it's the case that there's some sort of like internal conspiracy to showroom where they're like, all right, we're not going to sell these things. Frankly, in my experience, the sales staff, when they go and have their sales meetings on a Friday and they're talking about who hit their numbers, who didn't, and all those different details, there's no one from fixed ops in the room. It's just the sales guys having their meeting. And a lot of that rolls back to, can they close a sale with confidence? If they feel they can close the sale, they'll sell the car. They want to move metal. If that runs on gas or electricity, from their perspective, it's like, am I getting my commission?
Right.
Hey, I'm set. But if it takes them 3 hours to close an EV sale because they're at their desk, like, typing on the internet, like, let me answer that question for you 1 second. That's a long time, and they need to know at the end of that effort, am I going to get that sale? So they can try and sell a gas car in 15 minutes from the perspective of how do I explain why it's great, because they don't have to explain anything aside from, hey, you want that color? Do you want leather? This has Bluetooth. So I think that what you're hitting on is important, and to say that if we can't give them the tools to explain what they have to explain so they can reduce that sell-through time, then we're really going to, again, we're just going to see the dealers keep saying we don't have the right ability to close those sales effectively.
And there's a lot of competition now. I mean, think about these marketplaces that are opening up, and that's a direct competitor to the legacy dealerships out there.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So that's a perfect segue to talk about the training. It's crucial for them to have their front line understand the basics. They don't have to be complete experts, although it would be great to have a dealership be the EV education center that it should be, right? They have EV education on their websites, but it's to your point about the experiences when you walk into a dealership and the type of information you're getting back, it's not exactly what
they're not embracing that information in a way that they can translate it.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent it's a top-down thing, right? So again, my experience is anecdotal, but my best EV experience from a mainstream manufacturer has been Cadillac, because Cadillac has kind of put EVs front and center of its product line, and and so it's clear this is kind of the direction, at least for now, that we are planning to go in, and and so they got on board and had pretty good experiences there. But BMW EVs are pretty key to their strategy.
Yeah.
I would say more mixed experience from dealing with the salespeople there, because they have a much wider range of cars. And I think it's still the case that there is that hump to get over, which is, for many of them, it feels like, unless the buyer is adamant they only want an EV, that it's just easier to sell a gas car or a hybrid.
Because if you can't answer the questions, why bother going down that sales funnel? Right. It doesn't even, again, at the end of the day, they're moving metal based on the brand they have. And traditional showrooms, if you're talking BMW or Cadillac or others, they have cars that run on both gas and electricity still. So they have a choice to make in that moment. Do I make a sale, or do I just tell the person, like, I don't know how to answer your questions? And the answer is they're going to try to close a sale.
Or do they make up an answer?
Well, that happens all the times too. But what we're seeing too, I think, on the EV front is when they do that, is that will come back to bite them. If that car gets returned, they get a low score, they're not going to keep their job. And so that's a big part of what they already know that. I think the guessing game is already proven to cause some problems. So I'm hopeful that doesn't end up being the case more often than not.
I think that Nico, we're 3 or 4 years into non-Teslas. It was just all Teslas back in 21. I mean, obviously there's a Leaf and there's a couple other vehicles, but now you're going to have lease returns coming back. The whole point of this is used car market. Now you're going to have a bunch of used EVs,
millions of them,
and it's going to. So you're going to not only you have to be versed on selling brand new EVs, you're going to have to be able to get those used EVs out of there as well.
Yep. So, and if it's not your brand and you don't know how to talk about it, it adds a lot more questions.
It's just, again, this stems all back from the electrification process and the enthusiasm or lack thereof because of the cost of putting those stations in and just thinking it was a waste of time. Again, here we are, fast forward, it wasn't a waste of time. So now, I would always say a trainer approach would be something that would be worked very well in a dealership or an order group. Having someone who's dedicated to EV and training the rest of their staff, that's the way to run about it. But not all groups have done that.
Well, turnover is really high at dealerships. Oftentimes, the sales staffs, they rotate sometimes 50% in 6 months, so that's a challenge.
Yes.
But I think what you're hitting on too is the investment was at the time the perceived investment for electrification at showrooms. They were like, man, what are we doing with this? It's proving to bear fruit. We've had to kind of grow into it a bit, and now that we have the multitude of models on the market, they recognize, oh, this wasn't some flash in the pan thing. Like, it's moving.
That's exactly
and so,
true.
kind of rounding things out, for those who have heard this conversation that might hear it later, how do they find out information about EV Blueprint? How do they get in touch with Darrin Somerville?
Well, I don't have, I'm brand new, so I don't have a website yet, but I do have business cards, and I'm on social media, so
you on LinkedIn too?
I'm on LinkedIn.
I found you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm available to give trainings to dealerships. Again, it's not hard to get those questions answered or given to a prospective client in a dealership. And if I sold cars, I think I would have a really easy time with it, only because it's really about asking the right questions. It should be, think about it. You go buy a computer for $600, and you go to a computer store, you go to the Home Depot, and you go to a refrigerator. I get pretty good consulting there. Think about it. Like, I'm going to buy a $70,000 EV, and the advisors don't know what the car does. It's really scary to me.
We've been conditioned. We've been very kind of lucky for the last half a century that you didn't really have to think that hard to sell it. You didn't. It was like, you know what? Do you like the shape of this car?
Yeah.
You like the color? You like the styling? A car has been an emotional purchase for a long time. Now that we're having to think about how the car is different, I think that's the biggest hurdle we have to contend with, because it didn't really require it to have to think. It was more of I feel that I want this one.
Yeah, it's I feel.
And the automakers have leveraged that in advertising for a long time, and they've relied on the fossil fuel industry for the other product that just also is highly advertised and out there.
Right,
so
exactly.
I mean, at the end of the day, people that are, such as yourself, you're passionate, you care, and you are the one that's going to be on that front line saying, I can help you answer these questions. It's going to require that type of enthusiasm to help move the needle on that training front. So again, my hat is off to you for the fact that you are diving in to do that, because we do need it as an industry.
Yeah, I mean, salespeople want to make money, right?
There's that.
So at the end of the day, like I said, you're moving a piece of metal, right? So whatever car you sell, you can do. But if you're not a consultant, in this day and age now, cars are more like computers.
Well, they're very unique in how they can be leveraged in your life, for no question asked. And that, to your point, we are teaching the old dog some new tricks.
Yeah.
But the old dog is a very experienced dog.
Right.
So we gotta make that happen. So, Daniel, anything else we didn't hit on before we close out?
Well, I mean, just one other thing. I mean, you're talking about buying computers. If I buy a computer, I'm probably going to buy it online. And what you found with Tesla and Rivian, Polestar I mentioned before, those are basically people buying cars online now, not through dealerships. So to what extent do you think that model is going to take over from the traditional dealership model? Or, I mean, I realize there are lots of legal impediments to doing that in lots of different states, but more to the point, do you think that's a bad way? Do you think it's better that we buy cars from dealers?
That's a really good question. People want to touch and feel a vehicle. They want to get inside. They want to try it out. But Tesla was very, very successful. People just ordering cars online, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next few years. Again, used car markets. Do the traditional legacy dealers bring those in? Do they send them and flip them out somewhere else? It's going to be interesting. But to your point, I think there's always going to be a play for dealerships, and they have the people on the ground right there to answer your question. You just have to spend some time. I understand what you were saying is a very good point. A lot of turnover. So how do you keep the same people? You train them, and then all of a sudden they're gone.
They walk away.
But if you train them right and they're selling and they're making money, they shouldn't leave.
Well, we're unpacking up. We're getting into the real rabbit holes
weeds,
of the dealer world. Yeah, but I think what you're pointing out is again, are dealers going to matter? And I think you brought up a good point. And Expo is the example of why this matters. Is that people want to get hands-on with these products. I think Tesla proved, again, the people that wanted to get an EV that was long range and they liked the styling of it, they would buy that thing sight unseen because they're like, I'm committed to buying an EV and you're the one that's making it. So I think that they leverage that very effectively. But we're now to a place where there's a lot of people that still have a lot of questions. But that's why Expo exists, is because those people, they inevitably will maybe want a faster solution. If they test drive here and go, I'm convinced, I just want to go doot and buy that car, I see that as something that people might want. But they still have to have an engaged experience with the product too. And in the long run, you still got to get it serviced. You still got to have a reliable resource for you to make sure that car functions in all the ways you need. So, Darrin, again, hats off to you for the work you're doing, because it is needed in this space. It's going to require passionate people to get it done. So, again, hats off to you. For those who want to, again, chat with Darrin after the discussion here, make sure to catch him. You can find him on LinkedIn. That's Darrin Somerville, EV Blueprint. And for those who are listening right now, this is the EV Reality Check booth powered by greencars.com.